In the rugged heart of the Wyoming Rockies, deep into the winter of 1882, the snow fell like a relentless curse, burying the world in white silence. Elias Hawthorne had chosen this isolation deliberately, seeking refuge from the clamor of towns and the ghosts that haunted his past. His cabin perched on a lonely slope, surrounded by towering pines that bent under the weight of the blizzard, their branches creaking like old bones. Elias stood at the window, his calloused hands gripping the frost-laced frame, peering into the swirling chaos outside. He was a man forged by hardship, broad-shouldered, with a face etched by wind and solitude, his graying beard framing eyes that had seen too much loss. At 45, he had buried dreams and kin alike, and now he craved only the steady rhythm of survival. It had been a pragmatic decision, nothing more. Months earlier, in a dusty post office down in Laramie, he had placed an advertisement in a Frontier Gazette, seeking a sturdy woman for domestic duties on remote homestead, cooking, cleaning, mending. Compensation paid up front, no frills expected. The replies had trickled in like hesitant streams, but one stood outers, unadorned, promising capability without complaint. He had wired the funds without a second thought, envisioning a plain, efficient soul who could handle the isolation as well as he did. What arrived, however, shattered that vision like ice under a boot heel. The letter had warned of delays due to weather, but Elias hadn't anticipated this fury. The storm had raged for days, turning the trail into an impassable wall of drifts. Yet, through the haze of flakes, a shape emerged, a lone figure battling uphill. Bent against the gale, Elias's breath caught as details sharpened. Not the sturdy matron he had imagined, but a woman heavy with child, her form bundled in a threadbare cloak that whipped around her like a flag in surrender. She clutched a worn valise in one arm and supported her belly with the other, each step a defiance of the mountain's wrath. He flung open the door, the cold rushing in like an uninvited guest. "You the one from the agency?" he called over the howl. She lifted her head, snow caking her dark hair, her cheeks flushed raw, her eyes deep brown, shadowed by exhaustion, met his without flinching. "If you're Elias Hawthorne, then yes, and if not, I've got the wrong hell in this storm," he grunted, stepping forward to take her valise. It was heavier than it looked, filled with the scant possessions of someone fleeing more than weather. She followed him inside without protest, shedding snow like a shedding wolf. The cabin was sparse, a stone hearth dominating one wall, flames licking at logs that Elias had split himself, a rough-hewn table scarred from years of use. A single bed in the corner, piled with quilts, shelves groaning under jars of preserves and tools. The air smelled of pine smoke, and the faint tang of venison jerky hanging from the rafters. She stood there, dripping onto the plank floor, her breath coming in visible puffs. Elias busied himself stoking the fire, avoiding her gaze. The swell of her abdomen was impossible to ignore, a silent accusation in the warm glow. "I sent for a cook," he said finally, his voice low and edged with gravel. "Not a nursery." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but her tone held steady. "The agency's short on options up here. War widows and such, they come with baggage. I can cook, clean, mend. The rest, that's on me. If it's a problem, say so now. I won't beg." Elias paused, poker in hand, flames dancing shadows across his face. He thought of the empty years, the meals eaten alone by lantern light, the silence that had become both comfort and cage. Turning her away meant more of the same, and in this storm, it might mean her death. "Supper's expected at dusk," he muttered, hanging the poker. "Rest till then. Bed's yours." She nodded, peeling off her cloak with deliberate movements, revealing a simple dress stretched taut over her form. Her name, she said, was Lydia Kane, from the plains of Nebraska. No more details offered, none asked. She eased onto the bed, one hand absently cradling her belly, and closed her eyes. Elias retreated to the porch, axe in hand, splitting logs into the deepening dusk. The rhythm soothed him, each strike echoing his unresolved tension. Who was this woman, writhing like a complication in human form? And why did her quiet resolve stir something long dormant in him? The first days blurred into a tentative routine, the storm sealing them in like conspirators. Lydia rose early, despite her condition. moving about the cabin with the efficiency of someone accustomed to necessity. She scrubbed the floors until they gleamed, her knees protesting, but her will unyielding. By noon, the air filled with the aroma of simmering rabbit stew, herbs she had foraged from his meager stores, transforming the plain fare into something almost comforting. Elias watched from the doorway, whittling a chair leg, his eyes tracing the careful way she chopped onions, her knife flashing with practiced precision. They spoke little. Meals were shared at the table, the clink of spoons the only conversation. "Pass the salt," he'd say, and she'd slide it over without a word. Once, as she cleared plates, he ventured, "You handle that knife like you've done this before." "Orphans learn quick," she replied, stacking bowls. "No room for waste." He nodded, filing away the fragment. Orphans. It explained the self-reliance, the lack of softness, but not the child. The unspoken question hung between them, thickening the air like unched snow. Elias found himself lingering longer at supper, studying the lines of her face-high cheekbones, a faint scar above her left eyebrow, lips that rarely curved. She was younger than him, perhaps 35, but weariness aged her beyond years. One evening, as the fire popped and shadows lengthened, Lydia winced, pressing a hand to her side. Elias noticed immediately. "You need the doc from town?" She shook her head. "Too far, and the passes are blocked. He's finished kicking like his father used to." The words slipped out, unguarded, and she colored slightly, turning back to the hearth. Elias leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Father." Her eyes met his, guarded. "Was. Mining accident, last spring. Left me with this." She gestured vaguely to her belly. "And debts that brought me here." He absorbed that, the pieces not quite fitting. Mining accidents were common in these parts, but her tone carried more a shadow of something unresolved. "Sorry for your loss," he said, meaning it. Loss was an old acquaintance. She shrugged, but her voice softened. "Life's a series of those. Yours seems no different." Elias stared into his coffee, the steam curling like memories. He hadn't spoken of it in years, but the isolation loosened tongues. "Lost my wife to fever 5 winters back. Boy too, not long after." Cabin felt to empty after that. Lydia's gaze held sympathy, not pity. Emptiness has a way of echoing, but it passes if you let it. That night, as wind rattled the shutters, Elias lay awake on his pallet by the fire, the crackle of embers mirroring his thoughts. Lydia's presence was an intrusion, yet it filled the voids he hadn't admitted existed. He wondered about her husband, the accidental tales she withheld like guarded treasures. And the child, would it bring joy or more sorrow? The questions swirled, but sleep claimed him eventually, dreams laced with faces from the past. As January wore on, the snow piled higher, turning the world into a frozen cocoon. Lydia's labors continued unabated. She mended his shirts with neat stitches, her needle flying despite the chill that seeped into her bones. Elias took to chopping extra wood, stacking it near the door without comment. He noticed how she favored her left side, how her steps slowed by afternoon. But pride kept her silent. One morning, after a particularly brutal night of wind, Elias found her in the kitchen, struggling to lift a pot of water from the stove. Her face was pale, beads of sweat despite the cold. He crossed the room into strides, taking the weight. "Sit," he ordered, voice gruff but concerned. She eased into a chair, breathing shallow. Just a twinge, nothing more. He set the pot down harder than intended. "Liar. You've been pushing since you got here. That baby's no featherweight." Lydia's eyes flashed. "And what would you have me do? Lie abed like some invalid?" "I earned my keep." Elias poured her a mug of herbal tea, sliding it across. "Earned it by not dropping dead on my floor. Rest means you last longer." She sipped, the steam warming her face, and for a moment, vulnerability cracked her armor. "Rest was a luxury I couldn't afford before. Back home after. It was camps and odd jobs. No time for weakness." He sat opposite, the table a barrier and bridge. "Camps, like the labor ones?" Her nod was slow. "My husband worked the railroads. Good man, strong. But the foremen, they had their ways." She trailed off, fingers tightening on the mug. Elias sensed the undercurrent, the story half told. "What happened, really?" Lydia hesitated, then met his gaze. "Not just an accident." He stood up to one of theme over me. The man thought he could take liberties. Tom threw a punch. They called it theft, dragged him off. Next day, they said he fell. But I know better. Ribs caved in, bleeding inside. They buried him shallow, handed me his watch like charity. The words hung heavy, igniting a spark of anger in Elias. Injustice like that festered in these mountains, where law bent to power. Bastards, he muttered. And you, left alone, with child and nowhere. Agency found me work. Here, she straightened, resolve returning. But I won't be a burden. You're not, Elias said firmly. But you're under my roof now. That means something. From that exchange, a subtle shift occurred. Their silences grew companionable, punctuated by shared glances over coffee. Elias began sharing bits of his life farm he'd lost in the war. The way solitude had hardened him like cured leather. Lydia listened. Her response is measured, revealing glimpses, a childhood in sod houses, dreams of a plot of land deferred by hardship. Yet tension simmered. One afternoon, as Lydia hung laundry in the lean-to, a sharp pain doubled her over. Elias, returning from checking traps, found her leaning against the wall, face ashen. Lydia, it's passing, she gasped, but he scooped her up, carrying her inside despite her protests. He laid her on the bed, fetching blankets and water. As she recovered, color returning, she gripped his arm. Why do you care? You didn't sign up for this. Elias knelt beside her, voice rough. Because I've watched enough suffering. And because, damn it, you're not alone anymore. Her eyes searched his, a mix of gratitude and wariness. In that moment, the cabin felt smaller. The storm outside a mere backdrop to the one brewing within the pull of connection. Against the fear of loss, weeks turned the routine into ritual. Lydia's belly swelled further, her movements deliberate but graceful. She taught Elias small things, how to brew a tea from pine needles for aches, how to mend a seam without puckering. In return, he showed her the mountain's secret citable roots under snow, the best way to trap without waste. Conversations deepened over evenings by the fire, stories unfolding like thawing streams. But shadows lingered. Lydia's nightmares woke her some nights, muffled cries echoing. Elias, unable to sleep, would rise and add wood to the stove, leaving a lantern's glow outside her door. One such night, she emerged, wrapped in a shawl, eyes red-rimmed. Can't shake it, she whispered. The sounds, the guards laughing. Elias poured her water, sitting close but not touching. Tell me if it helps. She did, in halting words, the camp's brutality, Tom's defiance, the indifference of those who could have helped. Justice, here, it's a joke. Men like that walk free while we scrape by. Elias's jaw clenched. Not always. I've seen reckonings, slow but sure. Their talk turned philosophical, debating the fairness of a world where power crushed the weak. Lydia argued fiercely for resilience, Elias for quiet resistance. It sparked something debate that left them both invigorated, the air charged with unspoken alliance. As February approached, the storm eased slightly, allowing a rare trip to the trading post. Elias rode out, returning with supplies and news, whispers of labor unrest, tales of widows like her facing scorn. Folks talk, he warned, about you, the child. Lydia's chin lifted. Let them. I've faced worse. But Elias saw the toll, the way she touched her belly protectively. That night, he carved a small wooden horse, leaving it on the table. She found it at dawn, fingers tracing the lines. For the little one, he nodded from the doorway. Something to hold onto. Tears welled, unbidden. Elias, thank you. The word hung, a bridge crossed. As the fire warmed the room, Elias realized the isolation had cracked, letting in lightened risk. What if the world intruded? What if her past caught up? The questions loomed, but for now, the cabin held them safe. Yet drama brewed. A neighbor, old Harlan from the valley, rode up one crisp morning, his mule laden with pelts. Heard you got company, he bellowed, eyeing Lydia through the window. Unwed, heavy with child. Folks say it's scandalous. Elias stepped out, axe in hand not threatening, but firm. My business. Right on. Harlan spat. Law might say different. Protecting strays ain't Christian. Lydia appeared at the door, voice steady. Stray. I'm earning my way. Question that if you dare. Harlan backed off, muttering, but the encounter left Elias seething. Ignorance, he growled later. They judge what they don't understand. Lydia nodded. And that's the real violence words that wound deeper than fists. Their bonds strengthened through such trials, moments of tension giving way to tenderness. Elias found himself anticipating her laugh, rare but genuine, over a shared joke about the mountain's moods. Lydia, in turn, shared songs from her youth, her voice soft against the wind. But high drama struck mid-month. Lydia collapsed while kneading dough, a false contraction gripping her. Elias caught her, heart pounding, carrying her to bed. "Breathe," he urged, cooling her forehead. Hours passed in vigil, fear clawing at him, the memory of his own loss is vivid. When it subsided, she clutched his hand. "I thought it was time." "Not yet," he whispered. "We've got more winter to weather." In the aftermath, confessions flowed. Elias spoke of his son's fevered nights, the helplessness. Lydia revealed Tom's last words, "Fight for us." The sharing bound them, turning strangers into confidants. The Wyoming winter of 1882 clung stubbornly to the mountains, its icy fingers loosening only in reluctant increments. Elias Hawthorne's cabin, perched on its solitary ridge, stood as a beacon of warmth against the fading snows. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of cedar smoke and fresh-baked cornbread, a testament to Lydia Kane's unyielding work despite her advancing pregnancy. The cabin had transformed subtly since her arrival, once a hollow shell of survival. It now hummed with purpose. A woven mat lay by the hearth, a gift from Lydia's deft hands. A small shelf held jars of dried herbs she'd gathered, and the faint sound of her humming, low and melodic, filled the silences that once stifled Elias. Yet, beneath this fragile harmony, tension simmered, as if the mountain itself sensed the storm brewing, no of wind, but of human conflict. Lydia's belly now dominated her frame, her movements slower but no less determined. She still rose at dawn, kneading dough or scrubbing linens, though Elias had taken to hovering nearby, his eyes sharp with concern. "You're not a pack mule," he'd grumble when she lifted a heavy pot, snatching it from her hands. She'd retort with a half smile, "And you're not my nursemaid." But there was gratitude in her glance. Their banter had grown easy, a rhythm born of shared labor and quiet evenings by the fire, where stories of loss and resilience wove them closer. Elias spoke of his late wife's laughter, how it once lit up their Missouri farm. Lydia shared memories of Nebraska sunsets, painting the plains gold before debt and death darkened her world. These exchanges were not mere words, they were lifelines, tethering them against the isolation. But the outside world was not content to leave them be. The trading post in Laramie buzzed with whispers, carried by trappers and merchants who eyed Elias's solitary life with suspicion. "That widow up there," they'd murmur over whiskey, "no ring, no papers, and a babe on the way. Trouble's brewing." Elias heard the gossip on his rare trips to town, his jaw tightening as he loaded flour and salt into his saddlebags. He'd built a life here to escape judgment, yet it followed like a shadow. Lydia, too, sensed the weight of unseen eyes, her shoulders stiffening when hoofbeats echoed up the trail. One frigid morning in late February, as the snow softened into slush, Elias returned from checking traps to find Lydia seated by the hearth, her face pale and her hands clutching a letter. The envelope was creased, the wax seal broken, and her eyes held a storm of their own. "From the agency," she said, voice low. "They're sending someone, a clerk, to verify my status. Says there's been complaints." Elias set his rifle against the wall, his gut twisting. "Complaints? From who?" "Doesn't say. But I know the type, folks who think a woman like me's a stain on their righteous town." She crumpled the paper, tossing it into the fire. The flames devoured it, but the threat lingered. Elias sat across from her, his hands clasped tightly. "They've got no claim here. You're under my roof. That's my word." Her gaze softened, but worry lingered. "Your word's strong, Elias, but the law's stronger. If they dig, they'll find I've got no papers, no kin to vouch for me." And the baby, her voice cracked, her hand resting protectively on her swell. He leaned forward, voice firm. "Then we'll give him papers. Whatever it takes." The words hung between them, a promise and a challenge. Elias had no love for bureaucracy, but the thought of Lydia facing scrutiny or worse, Being torn from the cabin needed a protectiveness he hadn't felt since his son's fevered nights. That evening, he pored over a tattered legal almanac, its pages yellowed but legible. Searching for loopholes, Lydia watched from the table, mending a shirt, her needle pausing as she caught his furrowed brow. "You don't have to fight my battles," she said softly. "Ain't just yours anymore," he replied without looking up. March brought a deceptive thaw, the snow melting into muddy rivulets that carved paths down the ridge. Lydia's due date loomed, and the cabin became a fortress of preparation. Elias rode to town, bartering pelts for supplies, clean cotton, boiled twine, a small bottle of laudanum for pain. He sought out Clara Boone, the town's midwife, a stout woman with a braid like coiled hemp and eyes that missed nothing. End of March, maybe early April, Lydia had told him to say. Clara nodded, handing him a bundle of muslin and a stern warning, "No heroics. If it goes south, you fetch me, storm or no." Back at the cabin, Elias found Lydia sorting the supplies, her hands steady, but her face drawn. "You trust this Clara?" she asked. "Trust her hands, not her tongue," he said. "Town's full of wagging ones." Lydia's laugh was brief but warm. "Ain't that the truth?" Their preparations were meticulous, driven by necessity and an unspoken bond. Elias built a low cradle from cedar, sanding it smooth under lantern light, his fingers clumsy but determined. Lydia stitched tiny garments from old flannel, her stitches tight and even, each one a silent prayer. They worked side by side, their silences no longer heavy, but filled with purpose. Yet the specter of the agency's clerk loomed, a ticking clock louder than the dripping eaves. One evening, as Elias whittled a rattle, Lydia broke the quiet. "If they take me, Elias, promise you'll keep him safe." Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened. He set the knife down, meeting her gaze. "No one's taking you. Or him. Not while I've got breath." Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she reached across, her hand brushing his. The touch lingered, electric, a bridge over the chasm of their pasts. It wasn't love not yet, but it was trust, hard-won and fragile. The storm struck without warning, a late-season blizzard that roared down the mountain like a vengeful spirit. It was past midnight when Lydia's gasp cut through the wind's howl. Elias, dozing by the fire, snapped awake. She stood by the stove, clutching the table, her face contorted. "It's time," she whispered, her breath hitching. No time for Clara, no hope of crossing the buried trail. Elias's heart pounded as he cleared the table, sweeping aside cups and books. He grabbed the almanac, flipping to the birth chapter, its instructions blurring under his panic. Lydia's cries grew sharper, her hands gripping the bed frame like a lifeline. "Breathe," he urged, his voice cracking as he boiled water and gathered cloths. "You're strong. You'll do this." Hours bled into a haze of pain and effort. Lydia's screams tore through the cabin, each one a blade in Elias's chest. He followed the book's guidance, opposing her, wiping her brow, urging her to push but fear not at him. Memories of his son's fever, his wife's final breaths, surged unbidden. He couldn't lose her, not now. When the baby came, it was silent, a tiny form slick with blood. Lydia collapsed back, gasping, her eyes fluttering shut. Elias's hands shook as he lifted the chilled boy, limp and still. Panic clawed at him. "No, no, no," he muttered, turning the infant over, patting its back as the book instructed. "Nothing." He bent low, sucking fluid from the tiny mouth, gagging on the bitter taste. A heartbeat later, a weak cry broke the silence, fragile but alive. Elias wrapped the boy in clean muslin, placing him on Lydia's chest. Her fingers moved weakly, brushing the child's cheek. "Samuel," she whispered, naming him after no one, a fresh start. Elias sank to the floor, trembling, his hands blistered from the hot kettle, his throat raw. The storm raged outside, but inside, life held. Dawn broke, gray and quiet, the blizzard spent. Lydia slept, Samuel nestled against her, his breath steady. Elias kept vigil, carving a name into a pine scrap, Samuel. The letters were uneven but deliberate, a marker of survival. He placed it near the cradle, a silent vow. But peace was fleeting. Days later, as Lydia recovered, a rider appeared on the trail, a man in a black coat, badge gleaming. "Territorial office," he called, dismounting with deliberate authority. His name was Silas Reed, a clerk with cold eyes and a ledger tucked under his arm. Received reports of an undocumented resident, a widow with child. Questions need answering. Elias stepped forward, blocking the door. She's my responsibility. Ask your questions and go. Silas's gaze flicked to Lydia, standing in the doorway with Samuel in her arms. No marriage license, no residency papers. Laws clear on mothers raise concerns, especially with complications. His tone dripped with insinuation. Lydia's voice cut through, calm but steel-edged. "On no complication. I work, I live, I'm here. You want papers? We'll get them." Silas scribbled in his ledger, unimpressed. 2 weeks to file a birth record and residency affidavit. Fail and we'll escalate. He mounted and rode off, leaving a chill deeper than the snow. Elias turned to Lydia, her face set but pale. "We'll handle it," he said, though doubt gnawed. The town's judgment, the law's weight, it pressed harder now. That night, as Samuel slept, Elias pulled a small box from under his bed. Inside was a silver ring, worn but etched with new letters. "Hope remains. My mother's," he told Lydia, holding it out. "If you'll have it, it's yours. Makes it legal." Her breath caught, eyes searching his. "You mean it?" Every word. She extended her hand, and he slid the ring on. It fit, unpolished but true. The act was more than legal. It was a defiance of the world's cruelty, a stake in their shared future. The days that followed were a flurry of action. Elias rode to town, filing papers with Clara's witness, enduring the clerk's skeptical glances. Lydia, regaining strength, tended Samuel with fierce love, her laughter returning as he grasped her finger. The cabin pulsed with life, but the threat of interference lingered. Whispers grew louder, talk of labor camps, of widows cast out. Elias overheard a merchant in town, "That Kane woman's trouble. Her man caused a stir, and now she's here, stirring more." Back home, Elias shared the gossip, his voice low. "They're digging, Lydia. About your husband." She nodded, unsurprised. "Truth's a weapon they wield poorly. Let them talk. We've got this." Her hand rested on his, the ring catching the firelight. But the climax came unexpectedly. A second ride arrived, this time a deputy named Cole, badge gleaming with menace. "Orders from Laramie," he barked. "Kane's widow is wanted for questioning. Her husband's death irregularities. You're to hand her over." Elias stood tall, axe handle in hand. "She's my wife now. You want her, you'll need more than words." Cole's hand hovered near his revolver, eyes narrowing. Lydia stepped forward, Samuel in her arms. "Question me here. I've nothing to hide." The standoff stretched, taut as a bowstring. Finally, Cole backed down, muttering about reports and returning with writs. As he rode off, Elias turned to Lydia. "They won't stop. Then we fight," she said, voice fierce. "For Samuel. For us." The cabin, once a refuge, was now a battleground. Elias and Lydia prepared, gathering affidavits, fortifying their claim. The ring on her finger was more than a symbol, it was armor. As spring crept closer, the stakes rose, setting the stage for a final. Spring of 1882 crept into the Wyoming Rockies like a cautious guest, its warmth teasing the edges of a world still gripped by winter's shadow. Elias Hawthorne's cabin, once a fortress against the cold, now stood as a testament to resilience, its walls bearing witness to a life reborn. The snow had retreated, leaving patches of brown earth and budding grasses in its wake. A garden took root behind the house, Lydia Kane's hands coaxing carrots and beans from the stubborn soil. Clotheslines stretched between pines, fluttering with Samuel's tiny shirts and Elias's patched coats, while wind chimes crafted from old tin cans sang softly in the breeze. Inside, the cabin glowed with purpose. Samuel's giggles filled the air as he crawled across the floorboards, chasing sunbeams, his lopsided knit hat, Elias's clumsy handiwork slipping over his eyes. Yet, beneath this fragile peace, the threat from Laramie loomed, a storm of human making that tested the bonds forged in the crucible of winter. Lydia, now stronger after Samuel's birth, moved with renewed vigor, her apron stained with life's messy joys, tomato juice, dirt, and milk smudges from nursing. The silver ring on her finger, etched with hope remains, caught the light as she worked. a quiet reminder of Elias's vow. Their marriage, formalized in a hurried town hall ceremony witnessed by Clara Boone, was more than legal. It was a shield against the prying eyes of the territorial office. Elias, too, had changed. His movements were softer, his voice less gruff, as if Samuel's presence had sanded down his rough edges. He chopped wood with a steady rhythm, pausing to watch Lydia in the garden, her braids swinging as she bent to pull weeds. Their eyes met often now, unguarded, carrying a warmth that needed no words. But the world beyond the ridge was relentless. Deputy Cole's visit had left a scar, his threat of writs and questioning about Lydia's past hanging like a blade. Whispers in Laramie grew venomous, fueled by those who saw an unwed Mother Evan won now Marietta's a challenge to their moral order. Her man caused trouble in the camps, a saloon keeper muttered to Elias during a supply run. Stole, they say, or worse. She's no innocent. Elias's fists clenched, but he held his tongue, knowing a fight would only fuel the rumors. Instead, he gathered affidavits from Clara and a sympathetic storekeeper, building a case to prove Lydia's legitimacy and Samuel's birthright. The tension reached a boiling point one April morning when hoofbeats thundered up the trail. Not one rider, but 3 Deputy Cole, flanked by 2 men in dark coats, their badges glinting with authority. Elias was splitting logs when they arrived, his axe pausing mid-swing. Lydia, rocking Samuel on the porch, froze, her hand tightening around the boy. Cole dismounted, his mustache twitching with smug certainty. Hawthorne, we've got orders. The Widowmers. Hawthorne, if you insist us to come with us. Irregularities in her husband's case. Witnesses claim she aided his crimes. Lydia stood, Samuel cradled close, her voice cutting through the crisp air. Crimes. My Tom was beaten to death for protecting me. You've got no witnesses, just liars with grudges. Cole's eyes narrowed. That's for a judge to decide. Step forward, ma'am, or we'll take you by force. Elias dropped the axe, stepping between Lydia and the men, his broad frame a wall. You're on my land. My wife stays. You want her, you'll need more than accusations. The second man, a weary clerk named Vance, pulled a paper from his coat. We've got a writ, signed by the territorial judge. Non-compliance means arrest for both of you. The air crackled with tension, Samuel's soft whimper the only sound. Lydia's gaze met Elias's, fierce and resolute. Don't fight them, she whispered. Not like this. But Elias's blood boiled, memories of his own losses as wife, his son fueling his defiance. I've buried enough, he growled. You're not taking my family. Before the standoff could escalate, a new sound broke the silence. Hooves, lighter and hurried. Clara Boone rode up, her mare panting, her braids swinging like a pendulum. Hold it, she bellowed, dismounting with a thud. She thrust a bundle of papers at Cole. You're chasing ghosts. These are sworn statements from camp workers, men who saw what happened to Tom Kane. He wasn't a thief, it was a man defending his wife. The foreman lied, and I've got names to prove it. Cole's face darkened as he scanned the documents, his men shifting uneasily. This changes nothing, he snapped. The law don't bend to liars, Clara interrupted, her voice a whip. Those men you're quoting? Half are in jail for fraud, the other half bought off. You want to drag this to a judge, you'll be laughed out of court. Vance hesitated, glancing at Cole. The third man, silent until now, spoke up. She's right. I've seen those camp records. Shoddy at best. We push this, it's our necks. Cole's jaw worked, but the tide had turned. He shoved the papers back at Clara. This ain't over. We'll be watching. He mounted, his men following, and they rode off, their silhouettes swallowed by the pines. Lydia exhaled, trembling, as Clara approached. How'd you get those? She asked, voice thick. Clara winked. Got friends in low places, and I don't take kindly to bullies. She squeezed Lydia's shoulder, then nodded to Elias. You've got a good one here. Hold tight. As Clara rode away, Elias and Lydia stood on the porch, Samuel stirring between them. The threat had receded, but its shadow lingered. They'll try again, Lydia said, her voice steady but weary. Let them, Elias replied, his hand finding hers, the ring warm against his palm. We're stronger than their lies. The days that followed were a delicate dance of rebuilding. Elias reinforced the cabin's defenses, mending fences and securing the barn, while Lydia tended the garden, her laughter mingling with Samuel's as he played in the dirt. Their bond deepened, rooted in shared defiance. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the mountains gold, Lydia spoke of Tom's dreams: a small farm, a family safe from want. He'd be proud, she said, her eyes on Samuel, and he'd thank you. Elias shook his head. I'm no saint, just a man who's learned to fight for what matters. By May, the cabin was no longer a hideout but a home. Vegetables thrived in the garden, their green shoots a promise kept. Samuel's first tooth emerged, celebrated with Lydia's cornbread and Elias's off-key lullaby, a tune his mother once sang. The couple's silences were now rich with meaning, their touch as her hand on his arm, his palm brushing her back, speaking louder than words. Yet one final test awaited. At the Laramie market, Elias overheard a merchant plotting to revive the case against Lydia, claiming new evidence of her complicity. Furious, he confronted the man in the saloon, his voice low but thunderous. Spread lies about my wife, and you'll answer to me, not the law. The merchant backed down, the crowd silent. Word spread, and with it, the rumors began to fade, replaced by respect for the man who'd claimed a widow and child as his own. Clara's affidavits had reached the judge, who dismissed the case for lack of credible witnesses. The victory was quiet, but final, a testament to truth over malice. Summer arrived, bathing the ridge in light. The cabin stood proud, its chimney puffing smoke, its windows aglow with lantern light. Elias carved a new rocking chair, its back etched with family endures, a gift for Lydia. She sat in it one evening, Samuel asleep in her lap, her head resting on Elias's shoulder as they watched the stars emerge. You gave me more than a roof, she whispered. You gave me hope. He kissed her hair, his voice soft, and you gave me a reason to live again. Their story closed not with fanfare, but with quiet triumph, a family forged in adversity, a love born from shared scars. The mountains stood sentinel, their peaks softened by summer's haze, guarding a home where grace had taken root. As this tale ends, we invite you to reflect on its the mess, resilience, justice, and the fight against a world that often punishes the vulnerable. What do you think of the violence and injustice Lydia faced? Should Elias have fought harder, or was their quiet defiance enough? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's spark a conversation about standing up to cruelty in all its forms. Your voice matters. Join the discussion and keep this story alive.